Hello. How are y'all doing? Going strong still, I hope. All right. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for the energy that you all have brought to Washington. It really is a gift for us, and it's one that we're really eager for you to bring to the Hill tomorrow. For those of you who were here last year, you may remember that immediately following the elections, we were aware of many threats to our immigrant sisters and brothers, but we were unsure of exactly what was to come. Today, we pause to take stock of what this year has meant, what we've seen happen, what we believe may lie ahead, and what each of us can do. So, as you know, and as we've been hearing throughout the weekend, this has been a challenging year. Rather than acknowledging the dignity of the migrant in our midst, U.S. policies have reflected alienation, the criminalization of migration, and they have sown division in our communities. We know that this affects all of us in different ways, but I want to acknowledge that it affects some among us, as we have heard, very, very personally. For those who are here with us from those experiences, I want to say thank you so much for being present with us. Thank you for the experiences that you share with us. Thank you for the courage that you bring, and thank you for the ways that you help us to grow as an Ignatian family. We will continue to hold you in our hearts, and more importantly, I hope we will seek to search for ways that we can enter into greater and greater solidarity with you. So let's talk a little bit about what this year has looked like, both in terms of policies and also in terms of people, and what this Jesuit network has seen. In the first week following his inauguration, President Trump announced 2 executive orders that tied human mobility to national security threats. In addition to his calls for the construction of a wall along the southern border of the United States, they called for an increase in immigration and customs enforcement and border patrol agents, for increases in detention, including that of asylum seekers, for increasing the criminal prosecution of entry and re-entry. These executive orders also changed the priorities that guided ICE's enforcement activity under the previous administration by essentially eliminating them, in turn making all individuals who lack legal status vulnerable to detention and deportation. We have also seen the administration eliminate and threaten existing protections. I want to ask you to pay special attention to this piece because I don't know how many of you are already familiar with it, but it's one of the pieces that we're going to ask you to speak to tomorrow. About 300,000 individuals from 9 different countries hold what is called temporary protected status, or TPS. This status provides protection from deportation and also work authorization for up to 18 months for individuals from certain countries who were in the United States when their countries were deemed by the US government to face extraordinary circumstances that did not allow for the country to receive and repatriate their citizens. So under law, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security has the authority to extend this designation according to the current conditions in each of those countries. Decisions on the extension or the termination of Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Haiti will be made at any moment now. Just Friday night, we heard reports that the U.S. Department of State believes that protection for these populations is no longer necessary, despite the fact that each of these countries sees high rates of outmigration, people leaving in search of life when conditions in their home country does not provide. As you can imagine, this determination will have a very profound impacts for these TPS holders, for their families, including many US citizen children, for the communities that they have contributed to, many for over 20 years, and for their home countries and the broader region. So that's one form of the temporary status or temporary protections that we're talking about. Additionally, as you know, on September 5th, the administration announced its decision to rescind DACA, those limited protections for young people who came to this country as children and know it as their home, yet lack the legal status they need to fully integrate. As you've heard this weekend, despite its limitations, DACA has allowed them to pursue their dreams of higher education and career advancement, to more fully contribute to their families and to their communities. This decision has impacted many in this Ignatian family and about 800,000 throughout our country. The Jesuits in the United States have long stood with the US Catholic bishops in calling for the comprehensive reform of our immigration system. But the urgency of this need has never been felt like it is now, as DACA recipients begin to lose the limited protections and work authorizations they've had in recent years. So the cancellation of these temporary protections only leaves many, nearly 1 million more, vulnerable to the very real threat of detention and deportation. So these are the policies. But what about the people? ICE arrests within the US have increased by approximately 40% compared to the same period last year, and the Jesuit network has not been immune. We have seen families separated and communities heartbroken when loved ones were detained and deported. Though we know that this is not new, we have seen the impact of this administration's changed priorities as people who would not have been affected previously were suddenly uprooted. Similarly, our partners at the Keno Border Initiative can give testament to the families they've seen torn apart. In the first 9 months of this year, they have seen a 143% increase of deportations of parents away from US citizen children. We see people with hopes and dreams, uncertain of what will be possible and what the future holds for themselves and their families. We see fear, and we see the pain of exclusion. Is this what we want to be building for our communities and for our country? Division, separation, fragmenting our families and communities, fear, exclusion, is not what our faith teaches us. Instead, it calls us to compassion and humanity, to seeing the face of God in one another, to seeking to understand, and to fuller participation of all in our communities as we work together for the common good. Our elected officials need to hear that we seek policies that reflect these values. Right now on the Hill, maybe not today, but right now, your senators and representatives are engaging in conversations, debates, negotiations on the fate of dreamers, on the fate of undocumented individuals, on the fate of TPS holders. Some are talking about what they're willing to trade for a solution for these people. So I want to ask you to please join us in telling them, thank you. 1, support, co-sponsor a bill that provides pathway to citizenship, the DREAM Act of 2017. We've been grateful to see various bills introduced by members of both major political parties and in both the House and the Senate that would provide a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers. Among them, we believe the DREAM Act to be the most comprehensive solution. Number 2, do not tie funds for detention, deportation, and additional border security to it. In May of this year, we saw that Congress chose not to grant the president's full request for immigration enforcement and border security funding, funds that were necessary to fully implement his executive orders. But Congress did increase what the U.S. was already spending on these efforts, including funding for an additional 5,000 detention beds, an additional $1.5 billion for border security. The president and many members of Congress would probably like to see these ramped up even further. But increasing funding for interior enforcement and border security contradict the essence of the DREAM Act and only further separate our families and our communities. We want a clean DREAM Act. And number 3, support TPS holders. Now you'll see 2 points up here. The first is urge the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security to extend TPS for Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Haiti. As I had mentioned, the Secretary has the authority to do so based on the conditions of each of these countries and will be making a decision any moment now. You should be aware that we're expecting a decision on this tomorrow, and so it could be that a decision is actually announced while you're on the Hill. So please just have that in mind. Our most immediate ask is that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security would extend this temporary protection. But if the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security fails to extend that protection, it's even more important that they hear your second ask, which is to support a permanent legislative solution that allows for these longtime members of our communities to more fully integrate. I want to say that a moment ago I spoke about the detrimental impacts of policy that we have seen in our network. But I think just as important are the signs of hope, which also abound in this network. Immigrants and those from mixed status families show me resilience every day and show that hope every day. We see it in the courage that they have as they share their stories with us. And in people who come out to accompany, to listen, to support. Throughout this network, we have seen your efforts in letter writing and in call-in campaigns, advocacy on local policies, efforts as part of ISN's campaign for hospitality. And this is important. This is essential because we need more hope, but also because rowing into the deep requires a long-term commitment. I want to thank you for each and every drop that you contribute. I truly believe that the contributions each of us here makes do make a difference, especially when we add them up in this family and with those of the broader church and other organizations with common hopes and dreams. And when we allow those experiences to also change us. I want to wrap up just real quickly sharing an experience today. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to eat lunch with a young woman who has seen the impacts of some of these policies very, very personally. And when I asked her what she thought about the teach-in and what her experience here had been, she said very candidly that it was great that we're all here talking about justice and about solidarity. But what are we all going to do when we leave here? And I want to bring that to you as a challenge for all of us. Tomorrow we take our asks to the Hill, but we have to remember that this is one step as part of a much larger journey. I'm grateful to share this journey for you and with you, and I thank you for your commitment to being here and to continuing to struggle for a world that is closer to what God might imagine for us all. Thank you.